The distress call came through at 2:34 a.m. on a rain-soaked October night that would haunt Sheriff Daniel Brooks for the rest of his career. After 25 years of law enforcement in Harney County's dense forests and mountain wilderness, Brooks had investigated countless missing hikers, logging accidents, and the occasional homicide. But nothing had prepared him for what awaited in the ancient forests surrounding Hollow Creek. "Sheriff, we've got a situation at the old Mackenzie logging camp." Deputy Emily Carter's voice crackled through heavy static and rain interference. "Search and rescue found the missing hiking group, but sir, something's very wrong with them." Brooks had been monitoring weather reports and coordinating search operations from his office when the call came through. The Mackenzie logging camp had been abandoned since 1989, when a series of unexplained accidents forced the company to shut down operations. The area sat deep in old-growth forest, 20 miles from the nearest maintained road, accessible only by treacherous mountain trails that became deadly in heavy rain. "What do you mean, something's wrong? Are they injured?" "They're alive, but they're not responding. All 6 of them are just standing in the rain, completely motionless. They've been out here for 4 days with no food or water, but they show no signs of dehydration or hypothermia. And Sheriff," her voice dropped to barely a whisper, "their eyes are open, but they're not blinking." Brooks grabbed his gear and emergency radio, his mind already processing the implications. Exposure for 4 days in Oregon wilderness should have resulted in severe hypothermia, especially with the temperatures dropping below 40 degrees at night. No food or water for that duration meant critical dehydration. Yet Carter described them as simply standing motionless. "I'm en route. Secure the perimeter, and don't let anyone approach them until I arrive. Get medical teams standing by at the trailhead." The drive to the Hollow Creek access point took 90 minutes through winding mountain roads slick with rain. Brooks's headlights carved through fog so dense it seemed solid, occasionally illuminating the towering shapes of Douglas firs and western red cedars that had stood for centuries. The forest here was different from other parts of Oregon. Older, darker, filled with sounds that didn't quite match known wildlife. At the trailhead, Brooks found a staging area that looked more like a military operation than a typical search and rescue. 3 ambulances stood ready, along with vehicles from the Oregon State Police, U.S. Forest Service, and an unmarked sedan that suggested federal involvement. Emergency lights painted the fog in shades of red and blue, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Deputy Carter met him at the perimeter, her rain gear soaked through despite the heavy-duty material. "Sheriff, the scene is 2 miles up Trail 47, at the old camp clearing. We've got portable generators and lights set up, but the equipment keeps malfunctioning. Batteries drain instantly, generators stall, even mechanical watches stop working within 50 feet of the victims." "Victims? You said they were alive." "I know what I said, sir. But when you see them, you'll understand why I used that word." They hiked through rain-soaked forest, following a trail that had become a stream of mud. Brooks noticed something disturbing about the vegetation. Trees near the path showed signs of unusual growth patterns, branches twisted in directions that defied normal phototropism, bark scarred with what looked like symbols, but could have been natural damage. As they approached the old logging camp, Brooks became aware of an oppressive silence. The constant Oregon rain should have created a symphony of drops hitting leaves, water running through channels, wind moving through branches. Instead, there was only muffled quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The clearing appeared through the fog like a scene from a nightmare. 6 people stood in perfect formation, arranged in a hexagonal pattern, around the remains of what had once been the camp's main equipment shed. They faced inward, motionless, their outdoor gear soaked through, but showing no signs that they had attempted to seek shelter. Dr. Sarah Jensen, the county medical examiner, approached Brooks with tablet displaying vital sign readings. "Sheriff, this doesn't make medical sense." Their heart rates are synchronized, all beating at exactly 47 beats per minute. Their body temperatures are holding steady at 96.8 degrees despite 4 days of exposure. And their brain activity, she trailed off, zooming in on EEG readings. What about their brain activity? It's showing patterns consistent with REM sleep, but they're clearly not asleep. It's as if they're experiencing vivid dreams while standing upright with their eyes open. Brooks approached the closest victim, Marcus Chen, 34, a software engineer from Portland who'd organized the hiking trip. Chen's eyes were open and staring, pupils dilated, but there was no sign of awareness. Rain ran down his face without triggering a blink reflex. "Marcus," Brooks said clearly, "can you hear me?" "I'm Sheriff Brooks. We're here to help you." No response. Not even a flicker of recognition. Agent Thomas Reed from the FBI joined them, studying the scene with professional detachment that didn't quite hide his unease. "Sheriff Brooks, I've been coordinating with the Bureau's Behavioral Analysis Unit. This matches a pattern we've been tracking across the Pacific Northwest." "What pattern?" "Missing persons in remote wilderness areas who are later found in catatonic states, always in groups, always arranged in specific geometric configurations. This is the 7th incident in the past 18 months. Brooks felt his pulse quicken. Why wasn't local law enforcement informed? Because the cases were spread across multiple jurisdictions and the pattern wasn't recognized until recently. But now we have enough data to establish clear connections. Reed pulled up a tablet showing locations across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. All incidents occurred in old-growth forests near abandoned industrial sites, logging camps, mines, failed resorts. Detective Robert Kane, who'd been examining the perimeter, called out, "Sheriff, you need to see this." They followed Kane to the tree line, where he indicated a series of markings carved into the bark of ancient cedars. The symbols were clearly deliberate, geometric patterns that repeated with mathematical precision around the entire clearing. "These weren't made recently," Kane explained. He'd worked as a forest ranger before joining law enforcement and knew tree biology intimately. "Based on the bark healing patterns, I'd estimate these carvings are at least 50 years old, possibly older." "The logging camp closed in 1989, Brooks said. "These predate the camp?" "By decades. And look at this." Kane indicated the ground beneath the trees, where stones had been arranged in patterns that mirrored the carvings. Someone, or something, has been maintaining this site for a very long time. Carter's radio suddenly erupted with panicked transmissions from the perimeter team. "All units, we have multiple civilians attempting to access the trail. They're claiming they've been called and need to reach the clearing." Brooks grabbed his radio. "How many?" "At least 20, sir. They arrived in separate vehicles, but they're all saying the same thing. They had dreams telling them to come here tonight." Before Brooks could respond, one of the catatonic hikers, Jennifer Walsh, a 28-year-old teacher, suddenly moved. Not naturally, but with jerky puppet-like motions that suggested her muscles were being operated by someone unfamiliar with human physiology. Her head rotated toward Brooks with a wet cracking sound, and when she spoke, her voice was layered with harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat. "Sheriff Brooks, you seek answers for what you cannot understand. The forest remembers what your kind has forgotten. We are the memory, and these vessels help us remember." Dr. Jensen stepped back, her medical training struggling to process what she was witnessing. That's not physiologically possible. Her vocal cords can't produce those frequencies. "Who are you?" Brooks demanded, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "What have you done to these people?" "Done? We have welcomed them. They came seeking connection with something older than your civilization, and we provided it. The forest has been here for millennia, building consciousness through root networks and spore communication. Your kind built machines on our land, cut our ancient ones, poisoned our soil. These 6 volunteered to help us understand why." Agent Reed was recording everything with his phone, though Brooks noticed the video feed showed only static. "Volunteered? They came here for a hiking trip." Jennifer's body turned toward Reed with movements that bent her joints at wrong angles. Did they? Or were they called by dreams they couldn't resist, drawn by frequencies your conscious minds couldn't hear, but your deeper selves recognized as invitation? The other 5 catatonic hikers began moving simultaneously, forming a tighter circle around the equipment shed ruins. As they moved, the carved symbols on the surrounding trees began to emit a faint, bioluminescent glow. "Everyone fall back to the perimeter," Brooks ordered. "Now." But as they retreated, the 20 civilians who'd been stopped at the trailhead somehow bypassed security and entered the clearing. They walked with the same purposeful movements as the original 6, converging on the circle with mechanical precision. "How did they get past the roadblocks?" Carter asked, watching in horror as the newcomers joined the formation. Kane checked his radio. "All perimeter teams report the civilians never passed their positions. It's like they materialized inside the secured area." The 26 people now formed a larger geometric pattern, and the glow from the tree carvings intensified. Through Jennifer's body, the entity spoke again. "Your barriers mean nothing. The forest network extends for hundreds of miles beneath your feet, connecting through mycelium and root systems you barely comprehend. We can guide our invited guests through pathways you cannot see or block." Dr. Jensen was monitoring equipment that was somehow still functioning despite the electromagnetic interference. "Sheriff, their neural patterns are synchronizing. All 26 are showing identical brain activity, as if they're sharing a single consciousness." Brooks made a decision that went against every instinct. "What do you want?" "Understanding. Recognition. Your kind treats the forest as resource to be exploited, not as the ancient intelligence it truly is. These 26 will help bridge the gap, living interfaces between your world and ours. They will return to your cities, your institutions, carrying our awareness, helping your species understand what you're destroying. You're using them as hosts. We are creating symbiosis. They experience realities beyond human perception. The slow time of tree growth, the vast communication network of fungal colonies, the geological patience of mountains. In exchange, we learn to understand your brief, frantic existence." Agent Reed stepped forward despite Brooks's warning gesture. "The other incidents, the missing persons from previous cases. Where are they?" "Thriving, serving as bridges in other forests. We are patient, Sheriff. We do not need to convert all of humanity, only enough to ensure your kind stops poisoning the web of life that sustains this planet." The formation of people began moving in a slow, rotating pattern, and the clearing's vegetation responded. Moss began growing at visible rates, covering the old equipment shed ruins. Mushrooms sprouted from the ground in perfect geometric arrangements. The ancient trees leaned inward, as if listening to a conversation only they could hear. "This is kidnapping," Brooks said. "I can't let you take these people." "You cannot stop us, Sheriff." "But we offer compromise. These 26 have been called, have chosen to answer even if their conscious minds didn't understand the choice. Any who were brought here unwillingly may leave. Any whose souls did not sing in response to our invitation may depart now." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of the 20 newcomers, a young man in hiking gear, suddenly gasped and collapsed. He was conscious, confused, but clearly back in control of his own body. I was dreaming," he stammered. "There were voices, showing me forests I'd never seen, roots connecting everything. It was beautiful, but terrifying. I wanted to stay, but something pulled me back." Dr. Jensen rushed to examine him. "His vitals are returning to normal. Whatever was controlling him released its hold. But the other 25 remained in formation, continuing their slow rotation." Through Jennifer's body, the forest intelligence spoke one final time. "We release those who do not truly wish to join us. The others have made their choice, consciously or not. They will return to your world in 7 days, changed but whole. Through them, we will whisper to your kind about the consequences of your actions. The forest has awakened, Sheriff Brooks, and it will defend itself." The bioluminescent glow intensified until it was painful to look at directly. And when it faded, the 25 people had vanished. Not scattered into the forest, but simply ceased to exist in that location. The carved symbols no longer glowed, and the oppressive silence lifted, replaced by normal sounds of rain and wind. The young man who'd been released provided the only clue about what had happened. "They're not gone," he whispered, staring at the empty clearing. "I can still feel them, somewhere below us. The roots go so deep. And there are chambers down there, caverns filled with life that's been growing since before humans walked upright." 3 weeks after the Hollow Creek event, Sheriff Brooks received a call that sent chills down his spine, despite Oregon's mild autumn weather. 23 of the 25 people who'd vanished had returned, just as the forest intelligence had promised. But they'd returned changed in ways that defied medical and psychological understanding. "Sheriff, this is Dr. Jensen. You need to get to the county hospital immediately. The returned individuals from Hollow Creek, they're not acting human." Brooks arrived to find the hospital's psychiatric wing in controlled chaos. The 23 returnees sat in a common room, positioned in the same geometric pattern they'd formed in the forest. They were conscious, responsive, and showed no signs of physical trauma. But something was fundamentally different about them. Marcus Chen, who Brooks had last seen standing catatonic in the rain, greeted him with a smile that was too wide and held too long. "Sheriff Brooks, the forest said you would come. It has messages for your species." "Marcus, do you remember what happened to you?" "I remember everything. My previous life as just Marcus Chen, and my new existence as a node in the forest's consciousness. I understand now what we're doing to the planet. Can feel every tree that's cut, every stream that's poisoned, every species that goes extinct." Dr. Jensen pulled Brooks aside. "They're all like this. Physically healthy, mentally coherent, but speaking as if they're part of a collective consciousness. And Sheriff, they know things they shouldn't." "What kind of things?" "Medical information about patients they've never met, details about closed investigations, personal secrets about staff members. It's like they have access to some kind of information network." Detective Kane had been interviewing the returnees and joined their discussion. "It's more than that. I tested them with questions about forest ecology, fungal networks, tree communication. They describe processes that scientists are just beginning to discover, speak about symbiotic relationships that haven't been published in any literature. Agent Reed arrived from Portland with a team of federal specialists. "Sheriff, we need to quarantine these individuals immediately. They could be carrying unknown pathogens, or worse, they could be biological weapons designed to spread whatever affected them." But before they could implement quarantine protocols, all 23 returnees stood simultaneously and spoke in perfect unison. "We carry no disease, only awareness. The forest does not attack with pathogens, it defends with understanding. Through us, it will teach your kind what you're destroying." Over the following days, the situation evolved in unexpected ways. The returnees requested to be released, claiming they had work to do. When asked what work, Jennifer Walsh explained with unsettling calm, "We're going to tell everyone what we learned. The forest's message needs to spread. Every tree that falls sends ripples through a network you can barely perceive. Every mountain stream that's diverted disrupts systems that took millennia to establish. We're the translators, helping your species understand before it's too late." Against Brooks's recommendations, a judge ordered them released after finding no legal grounds for detention. They weren't criminals, weren't mentally incompetent by legal standards, and showed no signs of being a danger to themselves or others. Within hours of their release, reports began flooding in from across Oregon. The returnees had dispersed to different cities, each carrying the same message about forest consciousness and environmental destruction. Some spoke at universities, others at environmental rallies, a few even secured interviews with news outlets. But the message they spread had effects beyond simply raising awareness. People who listened to them for extended periods reported experiencing the same vivid dreams that had drawn the original group to Hollow Creek. They described hearing the forest's voice, feeling the pain of trees being cut, sensing the vast underground networks of communication that connected ecosystems across continents. "It's spreading," Carter reported during an emergency briefing. "We're getting calls from across the state about people experiencing these collective visions. Most can shake them off, but some are becoming obsessed, abandoning their lives to seek out old-growth forests." Brooks reviewed reports with growing concern. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't just about 23 individuals anymore. It was becoming a movement, or perhaps an infection of consciousness that spread through human communication networks just as effectively as the forest's mycelial networks spread through soil. Agent Reed brought more disturbing news from federal investigations. "The other incidents we tracked, the people who vanished and returned from different forests across the Pacific Northwest, they're all doing the same thing, spreading the message, recruiting others, creating what amounts to a human network mirroring the forest's underground network." How many? Conservative estimate? Over 300 people across 7 states, all claiming to carry the forest's consciousness, all working to awaken others to environmental destruction. Detective Kane had been researching historical records and discovered something that put the situation in new perspective. "Sheriff, I found references to similar phenomena dating back over 100 years. Native American accounts, early settler reports, even logging company documents that were never made public. Every few decades, when exploitation of the forests reached critical levels, people started having these collective experiences." "You're saying this has happened before?" "Multiple times. And in each case, it led to significant changes in how the land was treated. The establishment of national forests, the Endangered Species Act, various environmental protections, all came after periods when large numbers of people suddenly developed intense concern for wilderness preservation. Dr. Jensen added her medical perspective. I've been studying the brain scans of returnees. They show increased connectivity in areas associated with empathy and pattern recognition. It's as if their brains have been rewired to process information differently, to perceive connections they couldn't see before. Can it be reversed? I'm not sure it needs to be. Despite the strangeness of their behavior, they're not dysfunctional. They hold jobs, maintain relationships, live relatively normal lives. They've just added this layer of environmental awareness that drives them to activism. Brooks knew they were facing something unprecedented. Not an invasion or attack, but a form of communication from an intelligence so different from human consciousness that traditional response frameworks were useless. The situation came to a head when Marcus Chen requested a meeting with Brooks at Mirror Lake, a pristine alpine lake surrounded by old-growth forest in the Cascade Mountains. Against advice from federal agents, Brooks agreed, bringing only Carter and Kane as backup. They found Chen sitting on a fallen log at the lake's edge, the water's surface perfectly still despite a light breeze. When he spoke, it was with his own voice, not the layered harmonics of the forest consciousness. Sheriff, I need you to understand something. We're not victims. We're volunteers. The forest didn't steal our consciousness. It expanded it. I can still be Marcus Chen, software engineer from Portland, but I'm also part of something vast and ancient, and that perspective has shown me things that terrify me about what humanity is doing. Things like what? The forests are dying faster than your scientists realize, not just from logging, but from climate change, from pollution, from 1,000 small insults that add up to catastrophic damage. The underground networks that have connected ecosystems for millions of years are fragmenting. Within a generation, vast portions of the planet's biological communication system will collapse. Chen's eyes filled with tears, genuine emotion that reminded Brooks this was still a human being, not just a mouthpiece for alien intelligence. The forest isn't attacking humanity. It's trying to save both our species by forcing us to see what we're blind to. Yes, it's disturbing. Yes, it violates our sense of individual autonomy, but it's also our last chance to understand before it's too late. What happens if we don't listen? The forest will continue expanding its network of human nodes. More people will have these awakenings. Eventually, enough of your species will carry this awareness that change becomes inevitable. But that process could take decades, and the forests might not have that long. Brooks looked out across Mirror Lake, seeing it with new eyes. The pristine water, the ancient trees, the delicate balance of life that seemed eternal but was actually fragile beyond belief. What do you want from me, Marcus? Help us legitimize this message. Right now we're seen as crazy, as victims of mass hysteria or cult programming. But if someone like you, a respected law enforcement officer who witnessed the phenomenon, spoke about what you saw, people might actually listen. It was a decision Brooks struggled with for weeks. How could he endorse what amounted to colonization of human consciousness by a non-human intelligence? But how could he ignore the truth of what the returnees were saying about environmental destruction? The choice became clear when 2 of the original missing persons were found dead in separate locations. Suicide notes explaining they couldn't bear the psychic weight of feeling the forest's pain. The forest consciousness, for all its wisdom, didn't fully understand human psychological limits. Brooks called a press conference and told the truth. Not all of it, but enough. He described finding the hikers, their strange condition. their return with expanded awareness of environmental issues. He didn't endorse their message about forest consciousness, but he did acknowledge that their experience, whatever its source, had given them genuine insights into ecological destruction. The response was mixed. Some praised his honesty, others accused him of enabling delusion or covering up a sinister plot. But something shifted in the regional conversation about forest management, about ancient groves that were scheduled for logging, about the invisible networks that connected ecosystems. Marcus Chen sent him a final message months later. "Thank you for bridging the gap, Sheriff. The forest understands now that it pushed too hard, too fast. It's learning to communicate in ways that don't break human minds. And humanity is slowly learning to hear messages it's been ignoring for centuries. Neither side knows exactly where this is leading, but at least we're learning together." 6 months after the Mirror Lake meeting, Brooks thought the crisis had stabilized. The returnees had integrated back into society, their environmental activism intense, but not destructive. Reports of new forest consciousness experiences had dropped to manageable levels. Oregon was learning to live with the strange reality that something ancient and vast was aware of human activities and wasn't remaining silent anymore. Then everything changed on a February morning when Deputy Carter burst into his office with tablets showing seismic activity reports. "Sheriff, USGS is detecting unusual readings throughout the Cascade Range. Not earthquakes exactly, but synchronized vibrations that are affecting the entire mountain system." Brooks studied the data. The seismic stations showed rhythmic pulses occurring simultaneously across hundreds of miles, a pattern that shouldn't be possible through natural geological processes. Detective Kane joined them with additional disturbing information. "All across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, people are reporting the same dream. Thousands of them, all last night, all describing being called to specific coordinates in the mountains. The coordinates lead to old-growth groves," Carter added. "Every single one is a pristine forest that's been protected from logging, some for over a century." Agent Reed conference called from FBI headquarters. "Sheriff, this is coordinated on a scale we never imagined possible. Our estimates suggest over 50,000 people across 3 states received these dreams, and they're not just the returnees or their contacts. They're randomly distributed across the population. What are the dreams telling them to do? To gather at these forest locations tomorrow night. February 28th, the new moon. The messages describe it as a convergence, a mass connection event between the forest consciousness and human awareness." Brooks felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. 50,000 people converging on pristine wilderness areas could cause catastrophic damage to the very ecosystems they claimed to revere. But how could law enforcement stop that many people from accessing public lands? Dr. Jensen had been consulting with mycologists and neuroscientists to understand the biological basis for the forest's communication abilities. "Sheriff, I think I understand what's happening. The forest has been building toward this for months, maybe years. The early incidents were tests, learning how to interface with human consciousness without causing psychological damage. Now it's ready for a much larger scale connection. To what end? I believe it wants to create a permanent network, a sustained connection between human awareness and forest intelligence. Not replacing our consciousness like with the first victims, but creating a symbiotic relationship where both types of intelligence can communicate directly. Federal agencies mobilized to prevent the convergence, establishing roadblocks around every identified old-growth location. But on the night of February 28th, something unprecedented occurred. Brooks was monitoring operations from the Cascade Range Command Center when reports started flooding in. The 50,000 people hadn't gathered at the predicted locations. Instead, they'd appeared spontaneously in the forests, bypassing every security measure and roadblock. "How is this possible?" Reed demanded through video conference. "We had every access point under surveillance." Marcus Chen, who'd been brought in as a consultant, explained with eerie calm. "The forest network extends for hundreds of miles underground. It can guide people through spaces you can't monitor, through private property, through wilderness areas with no trails, through dimensional pathways you don't have the perception to detect." In forests across 3 states, people gathered in massive circles, holding hands, connecting their consciousness to something vast and ancient. Through remote sensors and brave volunteers who entered the affected areas, Brooks witnessed what was happening. The people weren't catatonic like the original victims. They were awake, aware, experiencing reality from 2 perspectives simultaneously, human and forest. They could feel root systems spreading through soil, chemical signals passing between trees, the slow ancient wisdom of organisms that measured time in centuries rather than seconds. But they also retained their human awareness, their individual personalities, their personal memories. The forest had learned to share space in human consciousness rather than dominating it. "It's beautiful," Jennifer Walsh said, speaking to Brooks through radio from one of the gatherings. "I can feel the whole network now. Millions of organisms all communicating, all cooperating. And I can feel the damage, too, the places where the network has been cut, where ancient connections have been severed. It hurts, Sheriff. It physically hurts to feel what we've done." Over the next 6 hours, 50,000 people experienced direct connection with forest consciousness. When the convergence ended at dawn, they returned to their homes changed, but functional. They carried awareness of environmental interconnection that would influence every decision they made for the rest of their lives. The long-term effects became apparent over the following months. Policy changes that had seemed impossible suddenly found public support. Legislation protecting old-growth forests passed with overwhelming majorities. Industries that depended on resource extraction began shifting toward sustainable practices, driven by demands from employees and customers who'd experienced the convergence. "It's changing society," Carter observed during one of their regular briefings. "Not through force or fear, but through expanded awareness. People make different choices when they understand the full consequences. But there were costs. Some individuals couldn't integrate the experience, developing what psychologists called consciousness dysphoria, an inability to reconcile their human identity with the vast alien perspective they'd touched. Suicide rates among convergence participants, while low, were significantly higher than baseline. Dr. Jensen worked with other medical professionals to develop integration therapy, helping people process their expanded awareness without losing their sense of individual identity. Brooks made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. 1 year after the Cascade Convergence, he requested direct contact with the forest consciousness through Marcus Chen as intermediary. "Why would you want that?" Chen asked. "You've resisted this connection from the beginning." "Because I need to understand what we're really dealing with." "Not secondhand, not through witnesses. If I'm going to help manage the relationship between human society and forest intelligence, I need to experience it directly." The connection happened at Mirror Lake, the same location where Chen had made his original plea for understanding. Brooks sat on the forest floor, his back against an ancient cedar, while Chen guided him through the mental exercises that would open his consciousness to the forest network. When the connection formed, Brooks experienced a moment of absolute terror, followed by profound wonder. He felt the vast patience of organisms that had existed for millennia, The intricate dance of nutrients flowing through mycelial networks, the quiet communication passing between trees through chemical signals and root connections. But he also felt something unexpected: the forest's own fear and confusion. It didn't fully understand humanity, couldn't comprehend why creatures capable of such intelligence would destroy their own life support systems. The forest was reaching out not from a position of superiority, but from desperate confusion and hope that communication might prevent catastrophe. When the connection ended, Brooks found himself weeping for reasons he couldn't fully articulate. Loss, hope, fear, and wonder all mixed together in emotional complexity that human language couldn't adequately express. "Now you understand," Chen said softly. "I understand that we're both terrified," Brooks replied. "The forest is afraid of losing itself to human destruction, and humanity is afraid of losing itself to something we can't fully comprehend. Neither side knows how this ends. But you'll help us navigate it." "I'll try. Because the alternative, continuing as we have been, guarantees disaster for both our species." Sheriff Daniel Brooks continued his duties, but with expanded perspective that influenced every decision. He became an unofficial liaison between human society and forest consciousness, helping interpret each to the other, working to find paths toward genuine symbiosis rather than mutual destruction. The forests of Oregon continued their quiet communication, their vast underground networks processing information in timescales humans could barely perceive. And scattered throughout the Pacific Northwest, thousands of people carried dual awareness: human and forest, individual and collective, momentary and eternal. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter in the ancient relationship between humanity and the natural world. What that chapter would contain, whether it would end in harmony or tragedy, remained to be seen. But Sheriff Brooks would be there to witness it, carrying awareness that spanned two types of consciousness, trying to help both sides understand what was at stake in their struggle to coexist on a planet that belonged, ultimately, to neither one alone.